Hey YouTube, Mr. Terry here, your history teacher and now your gaming teacher because you're on the Mr. Terry Gaming channel. As a lot of you know, I am a big kind of gamer, especially console games. I've been playing console games since I was a tiny child, some of my earliest memories, basically. And you've probably noticed that too. I'm big into gaming. I'm a collector of retro stuff. If you see on my history channel, on my wall, in my old studio, you saw game after game, right? You saw just tons of that stuff. And so, and a lot of you have asked, what kind of games do I like? What are my favorite games? What are my favorite consoles? Because I've played, I think for the most popular consoles I have played and as an adult have been able to own when I get them cheap and they're older and stuff like that. So I get these questions a lot. And I thought today it would be fun to do what is seemingly very popular, was to make a tiered list of my favorite consoles. And I thought we would go ahead and do that today. So let's check this out and I'll show you what we are going to do. All right, so how Tier Maker works, and you can do this on your own, just type video game consoles, is they have all these consoles throughout history. You can see all their pictures and stuff down here. And what we're going to do here is put it into 5 tiers. All right, 5 tiers. Now, I'm trying to see here. I'm assuming, even though red usually people say is bad, I'm going to put the S tier as the top. I think that's hopefully what they're going for this. But I'm going to go from top to bottom. So basically got 5 tiers here. And one rule I'm going to put in here, I think you can understand, is I'm only going to put games that I've owned and I've played, right? It'd be fair to not do that. And just looking at the list and what's on here, I think I'm going to be able to put a lot of them in here. Probably not all of them. I will say one group that's unfortunately going to get hit by this in a negative way is going to be handheld games as compared to kind of stay-at-home console systems. So that is going to get hurt a little bit. But I thought we would go ahead and do this kind of live here and see how this goes. So let's just go in order, basically. The first one we got here, you guys might not even know what this is right here. This is called the TurboGrafx 16. It is a hidden gem of a system. It, unfortunately, in America, had to compete with Nintendo and Sega. And it definitely was a very distant third to even when it was the NES and Sega Genesis, or when Super Nintendo came along and Genesis, it in America didn't do as well. If you were in Japan, this would have been a more popular system. It was actually called the PC Engine over there, but it's a great system. I'll tell you, if you are interested in retro gaming, the group that this is going to appeal to the most is going to be fans of shooters, right? You got your space shooters and stuff like that. It's like, I swear, most of the games on this system. It's not my favorite genre, but I can really appreciate it, and I can see how it stacks up against like Sega Genesis, NES, or Super Nintendo. It's the one you want to go for. One of the problems with it, though, is the console, you're probably going to spend a couple $100 to get one, maybe 100, maybe 150 or so. And the games, unfortunately, are fairly expensive. You're going to pay almost modern-day prices for games. But that's not necessarily the case for a lot of the good ones. The real popular ones, you might pay more. But anyway, if you're a fan of that, but it is truly an awesome system. It has amazing sound. It has amazing colors. It's unfortunate they came a distant third, and I had no idea that console even existed until I was an adult and heard about it. But I got it a couple years ago, and some of the great games, the Bonk's Adventure games, if you've ever seen those are awesome. Interestingly, one of the best sort of series of games for that is actually a pinball series, Devil's Crush and Alien Crush. They're a lot of fun. But there are some really good games on this. Now I'm going to go ahead and just start my initial feeling. I'm going to put this probably in the middle right now. If it had more games that weren't shooters, more other types of, there are some good platformers and stuff, but it would definitely be up there. But it's a system I'm looking to, again, collect more and more of. But I'm going to go ahead and put this in the middle tier right now. And I think I'm going to be moving this stuff around as I see fit, but let's just start right there. Okay, the next one, actually it's the next two, and I want to group these together because these are the same thing. On the left is what's called the Super Famicom. That is the Japanese Super Nintendo. So this console, of course, is incredible. As I'm going to talk about it here, because I'm going to go ahead and just connect the Super Famicom and the Super Nintendo together, and we're going to go ahead and just put those together. Now, interestingly about Super Nintendo is I did not own one as a kid. it was impossible. I'm sure you all had childhood similar to own the competing consoles of a generation. Now, when I grew up, the big earliest one for me, like that I really played, was the NES. Right, it's a beloved console for me. And then in the late 80s, the Sega Genesis came out, and we bought that. We bought that as my family. Now, Sega Genesis came out a couple years before the Super Nintendo, so we weren't able to afford that. So I mostly just had the Sega, but I played a lot of Super Nintendo because my friends had it, and it was kind of the best of both worlds because we'd come over and play the awesome Sega Genesis games, stuff like Sonic and the best version of Mortal Kombat and that kind of thing, and then we'd go over to a friend's house and we would play Mario Kart and that sort of thing. So as an adult, I've collected for it a lot more, and I love the Super Nintendo. It is awesome. I wish I would have had it as a kid, but it does deserve to be on the top tier list for sure. All right. Okay, so I did not have... I'll just tell you some of the consoles I didn't have. I didn't have a 3DO. I didn't have a CDI or anything. So we're going to skip some of these. So we're going to skip these guys. And then we've got the Atari Jaguar. Now, I'm not going to put this in here either just because I never owned... I don't even know if I ever played a Jaguar. I know about it. And I know for a lot of people, though, it would probably be a low-tier system. It was the first 64-bit console. Came out before the 64, but it sucked. Like, people were looking at it and saying, it's a 64-bit system, but it didn't look like it was graphically competing with a Sega Genesis or a Super Nintendo. So I'm actually going to skip that here. Also, we got the Sega Saturn. Now, I never owned a Sega Saturn, but I was able to play a bit of it. It's also a system that has been, I think, appreciated a lot more. It does have some really cool kind of fun games that didn't necessarily rely on what was supposed to be next-gen graphics. Now, I've only played some of it, a little bit, so I'm kind of afraid to put it on the tiers, but I think I will. And I think I'm going to throw it, although I didn't own it, and I've played some good games on it, I'm going to put the Saturn probably in the middle tier right here. Although I do feel bad. You know what I'm going to do here? I'm fine with putting it right there, but I might move the TurboGrafx up to tier 2. I think I might do this. I feel a little more comfortable doing this. Okay, let's do that. Okay, next, the PlayStation 1. PlayStation 1 is one that I had a couple friends that did have it, but unfortunately a lot of PS1 has not aged well, and it is in that early 3D kind of thing. And a lot of those games haven't held up. The best games for the PS1 are obviously they're usually like the non-3D ones. I love like some of the puzzle games. I love like Puzzle Fighter or Intelligent Cube's kind of an interesting game. But there are some of the games that hold up okay. There's like the Crash Bandicoot games and stuff like that. Old Tomb Raider is basically not playable. I'm gonna go ahead and throw this in the middle. Right here. Okay. All right, this guy right here, I can't see. Is this a Pippin? I don't know, but I haven't done that. Okay, Nintendo 64. So if it was 1997, 1998, when this was getting at its peak, this would definitely be top tier. I'm going to throw the 64 up at probably second tier. Now, one reason it wouldn't get up to top tier, even though I loved this system, it has not aged well at all. There's only a handful of games, honestly, that are great. And similarly to what I was saying with the PS1, I don't think it's I think the best games are some of the ones that aren't like totally dependent on the 3D graphics. Like I love GoldenEye. It was one of my favorite games ever. It sucks now. It just as like a control. I shouldn't say it sucks, but it's hard to play. I will say, interesting, the first game on the Mario 64, although it was 3D, is still very playable. But I am going to put it up there because it does have some other good stuff in there. I think that's a good place. All right, then we got like an Odyssey. I don't think we're going to do that and have Sega Dreamcast. Not a console I owned at the time, but I did play. And interestingly is one that got overshadowed. The reason being is it came out just before the PlayStation 2. And the PlayStation 2 came out, because this came out in 99, right? 99 or 2000. And it came out a few months before the PS2. And the PS2, when it came out, basically obliterated the Sega Dreamcast for one specific reason. This was still when Sega was doing pretty good. PlayStation 2 had something that the Dreamcast didn't have. And it's what killed the Dreamcast, a DVD player. Okay, PS2 had a DVD player when DVD players were brand new. Also, they were about $400 when PS2 came out, which was about as much as a new DVD player cost at the time. So it made it sell a lot because families could all kind of buy into the PS2. The kids had a good gaming system. The parents wanted a DVD player, so it was there. But the Sega Dreamcast has held up. There's a lot of games that are fantastic on it. When you look at something like maybe Shenmue, Crazy Taxi is still fun to play. The Power Stone games are awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this in the second tier right now, which again is interesting because I didn't start playing this much till I was an adult. All right, next one, the PS2. I'm already seeing now that I'm going to need another tier to squeeze in this top half, because I'm not going to put the PS2 at the top tier, even though I think it could be. But I also think it's better than the 3 in A. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to slide these guys down to here, because I want to put the PS2, for me, at tier 2. It does suffer from one of the issues, which is that today a lot of the games aren't as playable. But I don't want to make everything look to today. You know what I mean? Now, the reason something like the Super Nintendo has aged so well is because it's mostly 2D, and 2D does not go out of style. And so I think we're going to stick with that. You know what? The Super Famicom, I don't want to confuse this. I think I'm going to actually just take the Super Famicom off and say that the Super Nintendo kind of envelops both of them. The PS2 is great, though. It introduced me to online gaming. The first online game I played almost religiously for a while was SOCOM, a great shooter, multiplayer FPS. Actually, I think it was more like third person, but it introduced me to online gaming, making clans. It was fun. And then I started playing some other sports games. I would play like Madden online, NBA Live. I would play online. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. It was great to have a Blu-ray or a DVD player there. I keep saying Blu-ray, but I got to think like somebody in year 2000. It was also the first console, I think, that I personally saved out my money. It came out right as a sophomore of 16, and one of my first paychecks I ever got was I went and bought a PlayStation 2. So that'll be awesome. Now, unfortunately, a lot of PlayStation 2s don't read the disc very well, so it is hard to kind of go back to them. All right, next one, we got a GameCube. Okay, GameCube I did not own at the time. Had a friend that had it, and it was pretty fun to go ahead and play. Maybe a little bit of an underappreciated console, because it's Nintendo, so it had great first-party titles. And I was in that awkward, for gaming, I was in that high school age where I was like, I'm too old for, Mario and stuff like that. I want to play Call of Duty and stuff like that, or Madden, and those games were much better on something like the PlayStation 2. But when I go back, there are a lot of awesome games for the GameCube. So I'm going to go ahead. Things like Smash Brothers was great. The Zelda games that are on there. A little game like Monkey Ball or something. But it's a fun console. I like going back to it. So I think for now, I'm going to throw this in tier 3. I kind of in between 2 and 3 right now for that. So that might change. Okay, next is an Xbox, original Xbox. Not one I owned, but again, something that I have now, but I played a lot with friends. Xbox didn't do it for me. The first party stuff on Xbox, I just didn't care about. I really didn't care much about Halo, and I know angry people coming around, but I would go to Halo LAN parties and you play with a dozen people. That was fun, but it's just not a console I was into. It was a big giant thing. I thought the PS2 was just better. It had better first person stuff. So I'm going to throw this in the PS1 kind of Saturn. I actually, just for this tier, I may actually put it in the bottom for right now. Because it's very comparable to the PS2. The PS2 was more for me. It's what I had. The first, it had more of the first first party titles that I was into. So I'm actually going to put it on the bottom tier right now. But I've played enough. Okay, next. Xbox 360. I'm going to go ahead. I already know. I'm throwing this up top. Okay. I think of the modern consoles, disc-based consoles, it's the best. It was the best. It was a huge improvement from the like PS2 Xbox, I feel like, era. And we'll talk more about what I think about like the PS4 and stuff, but I thought this made the biggest leap. Okay? The Xbox Live service was fantastic, worked well. The games were incredible. It had good first-party games. The Xbox, which actually, even though it's Xbox, you know, I was just saying on Xbox One, I didn't really into the tiers as much, or sorry, into some of the first-person titles. So as I'm tiering this right here, it's kind of interesting because it's not the first-party titles that sold me on the 360. Again, I didn't really care about Halo. Gears of War was kind of meh for me, but everything else was awesome. I mean, it ran well. I loved the. Playing the games, again, games like Call of Duty, I would play Madden. But then you got into things like Skyrim, my favorite modern day game, that modern game that exists. The original Red Dead Redemption. So this console brought me into RPGs. I did not care about RPGs very much at all before this. Okay, the only thing come close to it on the PS2, Dark Cloud was kind of fun, but nothing took me like something like Skyrim did. So I'm putting it up there. Also, I will say the Xbox 360 had the best controller I think still ever made. It was comfortable. It was functional. It was fantastic. So it is top tier for me. All right, PS3. I have a hard time putting this anywhere because I did not own a PS3. I couldn't afford to have a 360 as well as a PS3, but the PS3 came out with a lousy price point. It was like $600 as compared to like the $300. It was basically double what the Xbox 360 was. Now, Sony has totally learned from that. Ever since then, gaming consoles in general, gaming companies have understood that you cannot sell anymore your consoles at a profit. And nobody actually does that anymore. Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, they really don't sell their consoles at a profit anymore. They actually will lose money on their consoles. And the idea is they have to keep that competitive. They just want you to buy it. Because where they're going to get you is with games and licensing of games. That's where they make their money. So because of the awful price point this thing came at, I'm going to go ahead and throw it on the bottom tier. And there was no reason to get it. Well, I will say this. Going back, I did not know what good PS3 exclusives were until the PS4. So for example, The Last of Us. Amazing game. I played on the PS4. Right? I got the remastered version. God of War games. I never played on PS3, but I played on the PS4. So that was the only saving thing about that, but fortunately for me, it came up later with remastered versions. All right, the Wii. Okay, I did not own the Wii at the time when it came out, but I played it a lot, and it was plenty fun. I loved playing, Mario Kart was super fun. Some like the Mario games themselves were a blast on it. So it was more of a novelty. This is when this is the moment I think Nintendo started to veer away and understand their identity. They need to go after a different market than what Sony and Microsoft were doing. And we found that out with the GameCube. The GameCube just did not compete with the Xbox or the Xbox 360 or the PS3. It didn't compete with that. Or actually, in this generation, it would be for the GameCube, it would be the PS2 and the Xbox. Didn't compete with that graphically, and that's fine. So they started going off their own thing. Yeah, more childish games, sticking to the first party. So with the Wii, the motion controls, nobody really cared about them. They were a novelty for real kind of more gamers. Nobody cared about that. I'm going to go ahead and throw the Wii right here in this tier, the C tier right here. We're going to throw it right there. Okay, next one is the Wii U. The Wii U failed immediately from a marketing standpoint because people, it sounds like, didn't even know what the Wii U was. They're like, is it the Wii? Is it just a thing, like another thing like the Wii? But it was actually a completely different console. People were wondering if it was an add-on. It was a horrible marketing strategy. And from what I understand, Nintendo America told that to Nintendo, that like marketing this thing as the Wii U doesn't make any sense. So it didn't do well. However, it was a good little system. It had some fun games, playing something like Smash. Super Mario 3D World is one of the best Mario games I think ever made. It is awesome. I think it was the best one since Mario 64, which still might be one of my favorite Mario game ever, and actually video game ever, is probably Mario 3. But nevertheless, I'm going to go ahead and throw the Wii U in this category right here, next to the Wii. Okay? All right, Atari 2600. A little bit before my time, but I understand how important it is. It doesn't end up well, and it's hard for me to talk about it. You should probably get someone that's even a little bit older than me to talk about the Atari 2600, but it is a very important console. Unfortunately, what the Atari 2600 basically tried to do was port arcade games, which were miles ahead of anything you could play home. So it was watered down versions of arcade classics. Like you go and play the Pac-Man, and you're like, oh, I can play Pac-Man at home now, because it was kind of the first not first mass-produced, but really, really popular mainstream home console. And you play Pac-Man at home, and it was a crappy version of it. So I have a hard time placing this because it's not great anymore to play as much, but it is important. So I think I don't know where to place this, honestly. I mean, if we're just doing it today, I think I'm going to throw it back down in about this tier. And that's kind of sad, but whatever. Okay. All right. Next thing we got, it looks like, is a PS4. So this is coming to the end. When I'm making this video, it's July of 2020. It is the very end of this console's life at basically, a 6.5 year time span. It is a good console. Here's what I'll say about the PS4, though. The PS4, I don't think, made a very big jump from the 360 the 360 to the Xbox 360 or PS3, whatever, that gen, to PS4. I don't think that gen was different. Now, personally, I went from the 360 to the PS4. Not as big of a jump as I thought, as the 360 from like the PS2, that generation, I thought was a way bigger jump. So I can't put it at the tier like the 360 was for me. But it is a great console, had the Blu-ray, which, by now, Blu-ray players were not very expensive, so you didn't need to use it to double like you did with the PS2 for a DVD and your console. But it is a good system. I'm going to put it for now here at the PS2 level. I don't like the PS4 controller. I actually don't like any Sony controllers. When you look back on it, I think they're very uncomfortable. It's one thing where I think Microsoft has passed up Microsoft has passed up Sony is with controllers. The 360 controller, even the awkward, big, huge, the first Xbox controller wasn't very good. Then they made that other one that was a little bit smaller for the original Xbox, which was good. Microsoft has been better at Sony, I feel like. And now you even see with the PS5, which was recently released, the controller models, it's still kind of more PlayStation, but it's modeling a little bit more of it over there with like Xbox One controller, which is great. I actually use, even though I don't own an Xbox One, I bought an Xbox One controller for my PC because I like it better than the PS4 controller. All right, let's move on. The Switch. Man, what an interesting console the Switch has become. I always, when they said this was going to be was going to be designed as like a mobile system, I was at first kind of disheartened because I'm like, I want just like a good console. But then I understood Nintendo doesn't need to do that. Their first-party games are not on mastering and maximizing what like graphical capabilities are. Plus, when you think about Nintendo exclusives, you think about cartoony type of games that don't necessarily need that. I actually think now that you get the Switch there, graphically it's great. It's just fine. But being able to play that kind of on the go, or for me, like laying in your bed or something, is awesome. Now, the one thing holding back the Switch still is good first-party games. There are some, Breath of the Wild, it's more for another video when I talk about games. It's a good game. I honestly didn't like it as much as people thought. They put it as like a total masterpiece. I didn't get into it as much, even though I love the Zelda series. I love Ocarina of Time is my favorite one. I still love the NES, original Zelda, and Link to the Past is incredible. But the Switch is it really is a nice little console. And I'm actually going to put it next to the PS4. And I say that because I'm putting it at this level, although I will say, when I compare like the PS4 to the Switch is in the same generation, to me it's apples and oranges. They're doing two different things. And to try to compare them together, I don't think you can do that like you can compare an Xbox One and a PS4. That's what I think. But it's a good little system. It's fun. All right, next thing, an Xbox One. Honestly, I don't think I can put it here. I don't own one. Yeah, I've played one, but it'd be in a low tier. I mean, if I have to do it, I'm going to go ahead and throw it probably on the bottom. I'll go ahead and do this. I mean, I've played it a lot. Basically, for me, there was no reason to ever get an Xbox One. Exclusives weren't good. Didn't come out of the gate strong at all. They had that weird like you couldn't trade games because of DRM stuff. The Xbox One was already a really stupid name that they got. And they tried to get it out of the gate with the Kinect, which nobody cared about because nobody cared about on 360. It was marketed terribly. I'm going to put it at a low tier. Okay, next, Game Boy. Now this is going to be interesting because, like I said, I was never a handheld gamer, really. I didn't buy a Game Boy until Pokemon. I did not care about handheld games, but then when Pokemon came out, I was like, this is cool. I was a young kid, like, probably like 13 or whatever when it first came out. And I'm like, this looks like a really, really fun game. It was also if you want to call it an RPG, first RPG ever played. I'd never played a turn-based RPG. And to be honest, I've hardly played a turn-based RPG ever since. I just don't care about it as much. But the whole collecting of things. But I'm talking more about the game here and not the console. But it is the most important console ever. Or handheld console ever. It is amazing. It had a longer lifespan than basically anything on this list. Right? It came out in the 80s and it was still like in 2000 was still kicking butt. So my first one was a Game Boy Color. Specifically, it was when I bought a Game Boy Color. It was my first Game Boy because Pokemon Yellow came out and that was exclusive to that. And I bought it and that was honestly the only game I ever played on it. So I have a hard time placing this. But I mean, it's got to go up. It's got to go up here for me. For some people, and I totally get it, it should be top tier if you played more handheld games. So I'm going to go ahead and throw it up there. Okay. Now, and most handhelds suffered from the same fate, which was trying to make an awesome console game into a handheld game always sucked. It always was bad. Like, who wants to play a crappy version of Street Fighter? You know what I mean? When you have, like, you can play the real versions. But what made the Game Boy awesome was games like Tetris or the specific, Mario games that did come on. Super Mario Land, which was great. Link's Awakening is an awesome game. So I'm going to put it right there. Okay, next is the Game Gear. I owned the Game Gear when it came out. I had a Game Gear before I had a Game Boy Color. The idea of a big color screen, that's what turned me off from the original Game Boy, was the dark green screen. But the Game Boy, the Sega Game Gear came out, and I was like, this is going to be awesome. And it suffered from a worse fate than what games on the Game Boy did, which was Sega just didn't put really any effort into first-party Sega Game Gear exclusives. The games were not good. You could play Sonic, but it was terrible. You know what I mean? Mortal Kombat, I had that. It sucked. And the screen was okay. It didn't do well. And what killed it, it was not very portable because it took 8 AA batteries and it drained the crap out of them. So you only were playing this thing with an AC adapter and the wall in your house. But why do that if you can just play your Sega Genesis? So unfortunately, I'm going to go ahead and throw this on the bottom. And I had it. Okay. All right, next one, the Virtual Boy. I owned the Virtual Boy, and it was a cool system. It's getting a hate because it lasted less than a year. It had the red screen, as you guys saw. It wasn't very virtual. It had depth perception, not like virtual reality. It had depth perception more like what the 3DS does. I liked it. Mario Tennis, what it came with, was a blast. It was fun. Mario Tennis was great. The Wario game was fun. But it only had a dozen games or something, maybe a little more than that, maybe less than 20, I think, games on it. But I thought it was cool. It was very much like a novelty. It's an interesting thing. It was a commercial failure for them. So I will say my nostalgia is probably a lot higher than what this system should actually be at. So I'm not going to put the bottom. I'm going to put it about right here. Let's do that. Okay. All right, moving on. Okay, we're going to skip all these handhelds. Now, a Game Boy Advance I do have. And I bought Game Boy Advance for the same reason I bought a Game Boy Color. And that was Pokemon. Wanted to play Pokemon, was it Ruby was the one for that? So I played that, but I mean, it is a good system. It's way better than the original Game Boy. The games look fantastic on it. I think it's a great handheld. I do. So where am I going to put this, though? Because, again, my experience is very limited. I only played, really, Pokemon games on it. So here's what I'm going to do. I want to put it the same as the Game Boy. I actually want to move the Game Boy down. And I'm going to put the Advance at the same level. That's my initial gut right now. Okay? All right, we're going to do that. Let's move on. I did not own a DS. I got a television. Never played that. I did not do a DS. Wasn't into the handheld stuff then, so I'm going to skip that because I do see a 3DS over here. Now what we've got is this the PSP? Okay, so PSP I only got much later, but I can tell that it is a console that was pretty good. It had some good games in it, but I'm afraid to put this in because, yeah, I've owned it, and it's only as an adult, and I've hardly played it. So I have a hard time placing this anywhere because it could be like a mid-tier, but it's for me, I wasn't as into it for the same reasons as the other ones. So I'm going to go ahead and put this right there with the this tier. Because it's better than a Game Gear, but I didn't have as much fun. I don't have as much reason to play it as I would one of these other consoles, one of the Game Boys. All right, 3DS. 3DS is great. I should probably put that at the same level. I think I'm going to put all these at the same level. I bought this for Pokemon Y, or X or Y. I think I bought Y. And then also, I think the best game on this was Link Between Worlds, the kind of remake that they kind of did but added new stuff of Zelda Link to the Past. It was fantastic. Also had Smash Brothers on it. Had some cool online play. The 2 screens were very cool. I think the 3DS is awesome. All right, we're going to skip the other ones. What is... Man, they're really small there. Some of these other consoles. Game & Watch, didn't play it. I know it's important. It was the predecessor to the Game Boy. And then we got, a television or ColecoVision. We've got the old Ataris. Okay, this is the Famicom right here. I'm going to do the same thing I did with the NES. The NES, the Famicom right here is the Japanese version of the NES. So we got to compare them, but I'm gonna do what I did with Super Famicom. I'm just basically going to say the NES encompasses both of them. The NES is the most important system ever. It saved the video game industry, which was in a total crash in the early 80s, and came back and brought in something the gaming industry did not have up to this point through the Atari, ColecoVision television, and that was this: quality control. They were very picky about who could publish games on the NES, and they made sure that they were at least of decent quality. And that was one of the problems that killed the Atari and that whole ColecoVision and television era, was there was no quality control. And back in those days, it was hard to tell if a game was going to be good. We didn't have the internet. So you basically just had to, hope that it was good. Or again, what you did was bought a game because there was an arcade version that you loved and you wanted a home console version, and those usually sucked. So the NES changed that. The quality is amazing, and as my favorite game, it is still very playable. There's still a lot of terrible games on the NES that are just not fun. I would say there's probably more playable games today on the Super Nintendo or the Sega Genesis than more playable than the NES. But it has amazing games. It's still my favorite. It's what I collect for the most, if you've seen. I own over 600 NES games. I would love to get a complete set one day, but it's very difficult. But it brings a nostalgia and a lot of things for me. So it is a no-brainer, is a top tier. Okay. Now, I see an issue coming with the end here. I don't see a Sega Genesis. Now, I see a Sega Master System. Okay, well, we'll come back to the Genesis, because I don't see it here. And I don't know why on earth that would not be here. Okay, anyway, let's talk about the Sega Master System. I heard that there was a Sega out there before the Sega Genesis, and I was like, really? Really? And it came out before the Genesis and was more of a direct competitor to NES, and that's the Sega Master System. So the Sega Master System, though, is not really worth playing. It had some okay games, but the NES was better. I feel like I do have one, but there's nothing on it I really want to play. It's not as good. The NES was miles ahead, and the Genesis was way further beyond even the Master System. So there's honestly not a lot I can really say about the Master System because I only played it really as an adult. So I'm probably going to put the Master System down at the bottom, probably somewhere down here. I would rather play all of these ones more than the Master System there. Now, this is kind of a shame. Unless I'm not doing this right, I do not see a Sega Genesis in here. Come on, Steph Curry, tell me where it is. Unless I'm blind. We even got like a Nomad or something, which was that portable version. I don't see a Sega Genesis here. Either model. But I should talk about it. Where would the Sega Genesis go? The Sega Genesis is one of mine that I loved. It was fantastic. I had it, and I stuck by Genesis. You know, when people were talking about Nintendo, because Genesis was supposed to be like the adults or the teenager console, and the Super Nintendo was the kiddie console. Now that I'm older, I don't give a crap about any of that because I'll probably end up playing more Super Nintendo games than Sega Genesis today, even though I grew up on the Sega Genesis. It is, however, an amazing console. Sonic is awesome. It's still super playable. I love playing that. I loved, when I grew up, I played an NBA Jam. The Sega Genesis is what introduced me to fighting games, and really the only era of fighting games I ever played was with Mortal Kombat games and this Street Fighter games on that console. I really haven't returned, and only really for fighting games want to return back to those, but it is an awesome console. I would put the Sega Genesis in the second tier. I would put it in the second tier right here. All right, now I'm trying to think of the other consoles that aren't on here right now that you don't see on this list. And let me know in the comments if there's others that you don't see in here that you would like to see. But yeah, the biggest omission is the Genesis. I don't, unless I screwed up somewhere, I don't see it. Okay, with that's now I'm going to look over it real quick. Let me see if I feel comfortable with everything where it's kind of at. I do. I think I feel comfortable where I've put everything right now. Yeah, I think I'm comfortable with this. Again, I only put stuff that I did tiers on. All right. I would love to know your tiers in your comments. Make like 5 tiers if you would like, and go ahead and put the ones. You don't have to have done as many consoles as I have. I might be, older than you and played more of these things. As an older collector, I go back and play these. But I'd love to see and hear what you would put as your tiers of your consoles. So go ahead and do that down in the comments, or better yet, come on over to our Discord server, which is linked down below. We got a few thousand people there, about 6-7, pushing 7,000 people over there. We got a very active gaming set of gaming channels. You can come down and talk about this stuff, and that'd be fun that we could talk that out and see what you guys got. Okay. And with that, you guys, thank you for being here with my still new gaming channel. Most of what I do on this channel is a lot of live streaming of things, whether it's PC or consoles. Right now, my studio's packed up, so I haven't been playing my retro consoles. I hope to do that later in the year when I can get into a new place and hook all that stuff up again. But nevertheless, thank you for being here. If you haven't subbed yet, definitely sub, enable notifications, because I do a lot of live streaming and love to have you a part of those kind of things, a part of a pretty tight-knit but growing gaming community out here on YouTube. If you don't know about my main channel, I'm a history teacher, and I have a little more popular channel that is on YouTube as well. The link's down there. But anyway, love to have you be a part of our community, and with that, we'll see you guys next time. Bye.